By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat and wept as we thought of Zion. How can we sing a song of the Lord on alien soil? That's Psalm 137, the raw voice of a people in exile. In 586 BCE, everything that defined Israelite religion was destroyed. The temple burned, the king deposed, the people dragged to Babylon. Every other ancient Near Eastern people who lost their national god's temple simply disappeared. They assimilated, their religion died, but the Israelites didn't. They came back with something new, something we now call Judaism. The answer lies largely with one deeply unpopular prophet, Jeremiah. To understand how this survival was possible, we need to go back to the years just before the final catastrophe. In 597 BCE, Babylon besieges Jerusalem for the first time. King Jehoiakim and many elites are deported. Then in 586, the final blow. The temple is burned to the ground, the Davidic monarchy ends, the priesthood scatters. Consider what was lost. The temple was the only place to offer sacrifice to God. The land was God's promised gift. The king was God's anointed. The priesthood mediated between God and the people. These weren't just institutions, they were the entire infrastructure of Israelite religion. A covenant, a binding agreement between God and Israel. Without these pillars, what was left? Enter Jeremiah chapter 29. While false prophets promise the exiles a quick return to Jerusalem, Jeremiah sends a letter with shockingly counterintuitive advice. Build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat their produce, take wives and have sons and daughters, seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its prosperity you shall prosper. This is revolutionary. Every directive implicitly declares that faithfulness to God does not require the temple, the land, or political sovereignty. You can be fully faithful to Yahweh on foreign idolatrous soil. Marduk, Babylon's chief god, rules this land and it doesn't matter. This is the seed of a portable religion. Jeremiah also provides something no prophet had offered before, a timeline, 70 years, and then restoration. This is the first prophetic deadline in the Hebrew Bible. It serves a dual function. It validates the exile as real and divinely intended, not a mistake to be quickly corrected, and it provides hope with a horizon. The exile is not permanent, it is purposeful. This dual message runs through the entire book. In chapter 25, Jeremiah declares doom. I will banish from them the sound of mirth and gladness, the voice of bridegroom and bride. Then in chapter 33, the deliberate reversal. There shall be heard again the sound of mirth and gladness, the voice of bridegroom and bride, doom and consolation, two halves of one theological argument. The 70-year timeline anchors this structure. Look at the full arc. Jeremiah begins prophesying around 627 BCE. The final destruction hits in 586. He's taken to Egypt around 585. Then in 539, Persia conquers Babylon and permits the exiles to return. By 520, the Second Temple construction begins. The 70 years from destruction to rebuilding frame the exile as a defined chapter, not an endless sentence. But Jeremiah didn't just offer practical advice for surviving exile. He offered something far more radical, a complete reimagining of the covenant itself. Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 34. The new covenants. Here's the core passage. The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel. Not like the covenant I made with their fathers when I took them by the hand to bring them out of Egypt, a covenant they broke. I will put my law within them and write it on their hearts. No longer shall each one teach his neighbor, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least to the greatest. The old covenant made at Sinai was written on stone tablets, external, breakable, and broken. The new covenant will be inscribed on the heart, internal, unbreakable, permanent. The contrast is sharp across every dimension. The old covenant's medium, stone tablets. The new, the human heart. Location, external, given at Sinai, versus internal, within each person. Knowledge of God. Under the Old Covenant, it must be taught generation after generation. Under the new, all will know God directly from the least to the greatest. Durability. The Old Covenant was breakable and Israel broke it repeatedly. The New Covenant is unbreakable and permanent. And human agency. The Old Covenant requires free choice to obey. The New Covenant makes obedience inherent. That last route is where the theology gets genuinely radical and genuinely paradoxical. The Hebrew Bible, from Genesis onward, treats free will as foundational. Adam and Eve choose. The covenant at Sinai requires choice. Deuteronomy puts it starkly. I set before you life and death. Choose life. But free choice inevitably produces bad choices, disobedience, idolatry, injustice. The entire history of Israel, as the Bible tells it, is a cycle of freedom leading to failure. Jeremiah's new covenant resolves this problem in a radical way. If God's law is hardwired into human hearts, there is no choosing to obey, there is only obeying. The capacity for disobedience is removed. This is theologically stunning. It's also deeply paradoxical. It solves the problem of freedom by eliminating freedom, right? The very thing that makes the covenant meaningful, the choice to honor it, disappears. And this tension was never fully resolved in the Hebrew Bible. Jewish, Christian, and Islamic thinkers would wrestle with it for millennia. So Jeremiah had given the exiles practical counsel, a timeline for hope, and a revolutionary theology. But could these ideas actually save a people from disappearing? Return to the existential question. In 586 BCE, Jerusalem falls, the temple burns. For any observer in the ancient Near East, the conclusion is obvious. Yahweh lost. Marduk, Babylon's chief god, won. The covenant is void. Time to assimilate. Every other conquered people followed this logic. But the prophets, Jeremiah chief among them, offered a completely different interpretation. The destruction of Jerusalem was not evidence that Yahweh had been defeated. It was the opposite. The prophets had warned for generations that disobedience would bring destruction. Destruction came. Therefore, the prophets were right. Therefore, the covenant is true. Therefore, God is faithful, not weak, but just. This is an extraordinary logical inversion. The worst possible evidence against your God becomes the strongest evidence for your God. Jeremiah's distinctive contribution was insisting that God's everlasting covenant with his people remained unbroken. Even outside the land, even without the temple, even without the Davidic king. Combined with the concept of the new covenant and the practical counsel to live faithfully in exile, these ideas provided the theological architecture for something genuinely new, a religion that did not depend on national institutions. The nation of Israel became the religion of Judaism. Before the exile, Israelite religion rested on 4 pillars: temple, land, king, priesthood. All 4 shattered. Jeremiah's ideas built a bridge to something different. After the exile, Judaism was built on portable faith, internal covenant, sacred texts, community, and moral devotion. None of these required a building or a border. This is why Jeremiah's writings were preserved even though he was despised in his own lifetime. After the catastrophe, his words were the ones that made sense of the world. The most rejected prophet became the most essential one. The destruction of Jerusalem was an ending and a beginning.